So from my perspective, right, when we talk about anatomy of, once you find where that deer is, and Dan said a great point that I think I talked about on a previous podcast too, is when I put trail cameras out, right, I'm putting them in a spot where it's open enough that I can see the deer, I can get good shots of them, I can see their direction of movement and all that. I am not putting that in a place to hunt, because the spots that I'm selecting for hunting is going to be, just like Dan just said, ambush point, place where it's thick, where their movement is channelized, where they're restricted as much as possible. It's not always possible where you hunt, but I've hunted a lot of places where it's so restricted that I might only have a very small window or two to get them because of that. And some spots are just like that. And I've been like, man, I'm screwed. I can't take a shot now, and just watched them walk out of my life. But the whole thing is finding that spot that allows you to get a good broadside shot based on their movement. 20 yards is where I set it. I look for. It's not always optimal. Like you said, you can't always get that tree that's 20 yards from you. It's just not always going to happen, especially the right size tree. You can have some big ass tree or some really small tree that you can't hunt out of, but you got to find, I'm trying to find a tree that gives me that few extra seconds, right? That broadside and or quartering away shot, like Dan's saying, and get me in a position where I can do that. Once I find that spot, the very next thing that I'm doing is also what Dan said in the beginning of this, is now I'm looking at what wind can I hunt that on? Is it got to be an east wind? Can I hunt it on is it a west wind, and can I hunt it northwest wind? Is it possible for that? And then I got to say, just like Dan said, what are the thermals and how are they going to affect that? Right. So even when you're getting ready to go out to hunt, so I say, okay, weather forecast is great for tomorrow. I got a west wind. You get up in the morning and everything's blowing east for some reason, and you say, okay, I can't hunt that spot now. Right. So you got to look at it like that.
And it's okay to give up on a spot because of weather. I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. But, and then the other thing you have to look at is timing thermals. And I talked about this a lot, is everybody will tell you thermals rise in the morning and they drop in the evening. Well, that's absolutely true. But what time?
Yeah.
So you have to look at your weather. You have to look at the temperatures, when those temperatures are going to change, because that's when once the sun heats the air at the bottom of a valley, and this is really specific to hill country or mountains. And so that time could be as late as 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So different parts of the season, when you get that early, when the sun's, when you're like the sun's up by 6:30 in the morning, that might be
7:30, 8 o'clock. Them thermals are pulling up. Yeah, absolutely.
So you just got to look at that.
Later in, like towards rut, it's longer. It's like 9:30, 10 o'clock.
I had an afternoon spot that I couldn't hunt because damn thermals weren't changing. It was heading on 4:30 till they started dropping on me, right? So I was like, you got to look at that stuff too. If you hunt hill country or mountains like we do, they can be a pain. Always remember, thermals are stronger on clear days and less strong on cloudy days, because of course you need the sun to heat it up and all that. But anyway, good. I digress. So you look at that stuff and you say, okay, you put it in your little memory bank on your Onyx app or whatever, in your journal, whatever, and you say, okay, that's when I can hunt that spot. Now, what's my access?
Yeah.
How am I getting to that spot without blowing that spot up, along with the winds, right?
Yeah.
So you got to be downwind, right, and use that to get to that spot, and not minimize. You're going to cross, and where we're at, you're going to cross deer trails. There's no way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a.
You just gotta, like Dan always says, don't touch stuff. Have gloves on. Minimize when you're going through brush. Kind of bring your arms in.
That's kind of my biggest. That's my biggest rule of thumb. Sorry,
wear rubber boots and all that stuff.
Is when you're walking in, and you got twigs in front of you, don't be reaching out breaking them and stuff like that. For one, they're gonna smell that fresh break, and that fresh, from the bark and all that, whatever you call it.
That's one thing our dad taught us from the earliest ages. When you
don't touch it.
When you break that
walk
stuff,
around it.
That fresh break, it now created something that deer's understands that somebody went through there, and it's been recent.
Yeah, and then for you, a guy that's climbing, you get up there, this branch is in the way, and you go cut it and throw it down below you. What did you just do? Mm-hmm. No, that's stuff that should. You know what? If you've been scouting and doing your homework, That's something that should have happened months ago and could have washed off.
You know, I've watched the hunting public guys do this a lot, and I only just started doing it a little bit. I carry 2 different bungee cords out with me now. Is
pull
when
it,
stuff's in my way, instead of doing that, I bungee it out of the way. And then when I leave, I let it go again, because that one keeps you from making a bunch of noise. When you're breaking stuff, you're making noise, and then you're also sending out a different scent signature.
That, and you're not harming the tree.
Yeah, and you're not harming the tree. The biggest thing for me is the whole scent control thing, that it's about minimizing your signature. So a dog or a deer, they all have these amazing noses, and they can smell whether you're there or not.
Yeah.
But whether or not they determine you're a threat by how high that signature is. If you haven't showered in a couple of days and you don't like the wipe or something, you
might be a messy person.
You might have a hell of a smell carrying around with you. It might stay there quite a long time.
Yeah.
So one thing that I think people seem to forget too, even if you have the perfect wind and you have your thermals figured out and stuff, with the ebbs and flows of wind, if you could see exactly where your scent cone is around your tree, it's going to be like a mushroom.
Yeah.
Right? Around that tree. Your scent is going to be 360 degrees around that tree or ground where you're sitting on the ground. Yeah. And that's why I think thermals really come into play. If you can really get thermals on your side, like you, Dan, at different times of day when you're on the ground, those things are just dropping straight to the ground, and the deer would have to be right on top of you to smell you. Yeah. And the same thing on the tree, when the thermals are rising, those thermals are, their scent's pulling up and away from you along with the wind, and the chances of getting busted by a deer are small. Right. But what that deer's smelling from you on the ground is a low signature saying, oh, he was here a while ago, but he's not here now, coming in. So a lot of times, but I mean, when deer get sensitive to it as the season goes on, in our area especially, where it's a low deer density area, and as soon as we make our presence known in the woods, they really change their habits. And they smell that, and they'll be away from it and won't come back in some instances.
Yes, yeah.
So you have to be really cognizant of that. So when we do scent control stuff, wash our clothes, take our showers, all that stuff that we talk about, we do that to minimize our scent. Wear rubber boots into the woods, wear gloves walking through the woods, just trying to minimize scent.
So for you, anatomy of hunt wise, how is it different? How different is climbing for you before and after the foliage drop? So like hypothetically, before the foliage drop, you can get right to the base of
Great point.
What do you do after that?
Great point. So there are in the mountains where we hunt, right? Like you said, pre-season, when we first go out early season, you have a lot of leaves on the tree. When you're going up, you have a lot of places where you can get a great backstop, and you're not going to silhouette yourself, right? Anytime you're up in a tree where you have a lot of space behind you and you're moving around up in that tree even a little bit, man, you're just asking to get busted, right? It's a lot. You're just out there hanging out there, right? A lot of times I will try to tuck myself into a tree where the branches are allowing to be around me a lot. I like to have something really thick behind me, even as you get later in the season then, right? So later in the season, a lot of like your, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, like birch trees and stuff carry their green leaves longer.
Right, yes.
If you can find that kind of setup. I had a perfect setup for that on the power line close to our camp last year. I had a birch tree just loaded with leaves that I was able to nestle in a white oak that was right in there, and then acorns dropping all around it. And ultimately I didn't see a deer, but I thought it was a great spot,
So if you were in the hardwoods and there's not a lot, what are you doing?
Well, now I've changed my methodology about this, because before, and I haven't done it yet, it's a decision I made in the last year.
Currently, yeah.
Right, it's a decision I made in the last year. I have forced myself up into a tree, even though I know I'm silhouetting myself. And I think I've heard like Dan Infalt talk about this. He did this, and kicked himself in the butt last year for doing it. But if you're hard set that you're hunting out of a tree, you're selling yourself short. I think that you lower, you're not lower, but you hunt lower. You don't need to be as high in the tree. Hunt lower. Don't be super high. Get to a point where you have the backstop, right? With a saddle that's a little bit easier, or you just hunt on the ground.
Yeah. Okay.
Or you just hunt on the ground. Hey, if you like that clip and you want to see more, go down in the description below. I have a link there. take you right to the full podcast. You can watch it. If you want to see even more, go to the Everyday Bow Hunter channel, also linked below, and you can see all our great content. I got tons of videos there, and I got a lot more coming. So go there, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.